Hello, and welcome. Wherever you are, whatever time of day it may be for you, I invite you to join me here, in this quiet space we create together. A space for stories. A space for mysteries that lie coiled at the heart of our shared human experience. Tonight, we are not just telling a story. We are embarking on an excavation. We will dig through the layers of time, of culture, of fear, and of science, to unearth one of the most profoundly strange and unsettling true events of the 20th century. But before we travel to a specific time and place, before we name the names and trace the map of a spreading madness, I want you to consider something you do every day. Something so fundamental, so instinctive, you rarely give it a second thought. I want you to think about laughter. What is it, really? On a purely mechanical level, it is a bizarre physiological process. It is a rhythmic, convulsive contraction of your diaphragm and other parts of your respiratory system. It's a complex coordination of 15 facial muscles, a stimulation of your tear ducts, and a temporary override of your normal breathing patterns. It is an intricate, involuntary bodily function, but that sterile scientific description tells us nothing of its soul. Laughter is magic. It is the universal solvent for sorrow. Think of the different textures of laughter. There is the quiet, breathy chuckle of shared intimacy. There is the sudden, sharp bark of surprise. There is the suppressed, snorting giggle of a student in a silent classroom, a sound that is as much about rebellion as it is about humor. And then there is the glorious, unrestrained, full-throated belly laugh, the kind that makes you double over, that leaves you gasping for air, your sides aching, tears of pure, unadulterated joy streaming down your face. In those moments, you are utterly present. You are pure release. From an evolutionary perspective, laughter is a vital social tool. Primatologists believe it evolved from the panting, breathless playfighting of our primate ancestors. It was a signal. This is not a real attack. We are safe. We are playing. And for us, it retains that core function. Laughter is a social glue. It signals inclusion, agreement, and safety within a group. Sharing a laugh with someone is a profound act of connection. It says, I see you. I understand you. We are on the same wavelength. It builds tribes, diffuses tension, and affirms our common humanity in a way that words often cannot. But like any fundamental human expression, laughter has a shadow self. It is not always a creature of light and joy. There is the cruel, mocking laughter of the bully, designed not to connect, but to exclude and to wound. There is the bitter, cynical laugh of disillusionment. There is the slightly unhinged cackle of someone whose grip on reality is slipping. And perhaps most unsettling of all, there is the nervous laughter of fear and anxiety, that strange, involuntary response that bubbles up in the most inappropriate of moments, a desperate attempt by our psyche to release a pressure that has become unbearable. Laughter, then, is a paradox. It is both voluntary and involuntary. It is a symbol of joy and a symptom of terror. It can build community, and it can enforce hierarchy. It is a simple sound, and it is a profound mystery. Now, I want you to hold that paradox in your mind. I want you to imagine taking the physical mechanism of laughter, that convulsive, breathless, all-consuming bodily act, and stripping it entirely of its emotional content. Imagine a laugh with no joy, no humor, no release. Imagine a laugh that is only the raw, painful, exhausting mechanics of the act itself. A bodily spasm that you cannot control. Imagine a laugh that is not a response to a joke, but a symptom of an illness that hurts, an illness that frightens you, an illness that takes over your body and holds you prisoner. And now for the final terrifying twist. Imagine that this empty, painful, terrifying laughter is contagious. Imagine it spreading not through a virus or a bacterium, but through the air itself, carried on the waves of sound and light. A phantom plague that leaps from person to person, from village to village, leaving chaos and terror in its wake. This is not a thought experiment. This is not the plot of a horror film. This is what happened in 1962. In a nation on the cusp of a new dawn. This is the true and deeply strange story of the Tanganyika laughter epidemic. To understand it, we must leave the abstract and travel to a very specific corner of the world, at a very specific moment in time, when the pressures of history, culture, and hope were building to an unbearable intensity. Our story begins there, under the hot African sun, in a crucible where the old world was colliding with the new. Part 1: The Crucible. Chapter 1: A Nation Being Born. To understand a single bizarre event, we must first understand the world in which it occurred. Our story is set in 1962, but its roots run deep into the soil of history, fertilized by decades of upheaval, colonialism, and the passionate, desperate yearning for freedom. We must first understand the stage upon which our drama will unfold, the nation of Tanganyika. The land itself is ancient, home to the very origins of humanity in the Oldaway Gorge. But the political entity of Tanganyika was a modern and troubled creation. For much of the late 19th and early 20th century, it was the core of a territory known as German East Africa. German colonial rule was notoriously brutal, characterized by forced labor, heavy taxation, and the violent suppression of any resistance, culminating in the horrific Maji Maji Rebellion, where hundreds of thousands of Africans died. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the territory was handed over to the British, to be administered under a League of Nations mandate, and later a United Nations trusteeship. British rule was different, perhaps less overtly genocidal, but colonial all the same. It was a system built on racial hierarchy, economic exploitation, and the imposition of foreign systems of law, education, and governance upon a vast and diverse tapestry of over 120 different ethnic groups. But by the middle of the 20th century, the world was changing. The Second World War had shattered the myth of European invincibility and moral superiority. Across Asia and Africa, nationalist movements were gathering strength, demanding the right to self-determination. In Tanganyika, this movement found its voice and its leader in a remarkable man, Julius Cambridge Nyerere. Nyerere was a mission-educated teacher, the son of a chief, and the first Tanganyikan to earn a university degree outside of Africa. He was a brilliant political strategist and a deeply philosophical thinker. He co-founded the Tanganyika African National Union, or TANU, in 1954, and began to weave together the disparate threads of anti-colonial sentiment into a coherent, powerful, and overwhelmingly peaceful movement for independence. His message was one of uhuru na umoja, freedom and unity. He dreamed of an Africa that was not just politically free, but also free from the mental shackles of colonialism, a society built on indigenous values. This dream culminated on a single glorious day, December 9, 1961, just weeks before our story begins. On that day, in the newly built National Stadium in the capital Dar es Salaam, the Union Jack was lowered for the last time, and the new green, black, gold, and blue flag of an independent Tanganyika was raised. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated euphoria. A nation was born. The future seemed limitless. But independence was not a magic wand. The dawn of freedom is always followed by the cold, hard light of day. Nyerere's new government inherited a nation fraught with challenges. The economy was almost entirely agricultural, dependent on the fluctuating world prices of coffee and sisal. The infrastructure was skeletal. There were precious few educated Africans to staff the new civil service, a deliberate legacy of a colonial system that had little interest in creating its own replacements. And beneath the political and economic challenges lay a deeper, more profound social stress. What did it mean to be a Tanganyikan? How did you forge a single national identity from over 120 different tribes, each with its own language, customs, and history? Nyerere's answer was a unique political philosophy he called ujamaa, a Swahili word that translates roughly to familyhood, or extended family. It was a vision of African socialism, a society built on the principles of collective work, shared wealth, and mutual responsibility, values he believed were inherent in traditional African village life. This was a time of immense hope, but also of immense pressure and dizzying change. The old ways were being challenged. The new ways were uncertain. The entire country was holding its breath, caught between a past it was trying to escape and a future it was trying to build from scratch. This society-wide anxiety, this cocktail of exhilarating hope and terrifying uncertainty, is the invisible atmospheric pressure in which our story is set. It is the broad context for the madness that was to come. Chapter 2: The World of the Heya. Now, we must zoom in from the wide shot of the nation to a specific region, a specific people. Our journey takes us to the northwestern corner of Tanganyika, to the Bukoba district, nestled on the verdant western shores of Lake Victoria, the largest of Africa's Great Lakes. This is the homeland of the Heya people, the community at the epicenter of our story. To the Heya, this land is not just a place. It is a living entity, imbued with history, tradition, and spiritual power. For centuries, their lives have been governed by the rhythms of the lake and the land. They are skilled farmers, their entire culture intricately woven around the cultivation of bananas, which provide their staple food, matoke, and later coffee, their primary cash crop. Heya society was traditionally highly structured, organized into a number of small kingdoms, each ruled by a king or omukama. Their spiritual world was equally complex and deeply ingrained in daily life. While Christian missionaries had made significant inroads, for many Heya, the old beliefs continued to coexist with the new faith. This was a world populated by ancestors, whose spirits remained active and influential in the lives of their descendants. It was a world of nature spirits, of sacred groves and rocks. And it was a world where the line between good fortune and misfortune was often explained by the actions of unseen forces. Central to this worldview was the concept of witchcraft. This was not the cartoonish image of a crone on a broomstick. For the Heya, and for many cultures across Africa, witchcraft or abulogo was a real and terrifying force. A mchawi or witch was a person who used supernatural power to harm others, to cause illness, death, or misfortune out of spite, jealousy, or malice. The fear of being bewitched was a powerful social regulator, and when unexplained calamities struck, a sudden illness, a failed crop, a mysterious death, witchcraft was often the first and most logical suspect. Misfortune was rarely seen as random. It had a cause, and that cause was often personal and malevolent. Into this deeply traditional and spiritually charged world, two powerful outside forces had arrived: the colonial state and the Christian mission. The state brought with it taxes, cash crops, and a new system of law that often clashed with traditional authority. The missions brought a new God, a new morality, and most importantly for our story, a new form of education. For a Heya family in the early 1960s, the world was spinning. The authority of the old kings was waning. The new government in far-off Dar es Salaam was talking of socialism and national unity. The coffee they grew tethered their fortunes to the volatile whims of a global market in London and New York. And their children were being sent away to schools where they were taught in a foreign language, dressed in foreign clothes, and instructed in a faith that condemned their ancestral traditions as pagan superstition. The pressure was immense. The world was cracking open, full of both terrifying risk and tantalizing opportunity. This was the specific cultural and psychological landscape of the Bukoba district in 1962. It was a place of hidden tensions, of competing worldviews, of a people navigating a disorienting new reality. It was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. Chapter 3: The Island of St. Scholastica's. And the spark would be struck here, at the very heart of this collision between worlds. A mission boarding school for girls. Let us give it a name, a composite of the real schools of the era, to make it our own. Let us call it St. Scholastica's Mission School for Girls, located in the small village of Kashasha. Picture it: a collection of simple, solidly built brick buildings with corrugated iron roofs, set amidst the lush green of the banana groves. A church, a dormitory, a refectory, and a few classrooms. It is an island of European order and discipline in a sea of rural African life. It is run by stern, devout European nuns, perhaps from Germany or Ireland, who see their work as a sacred calling, to save souls and civilize the natives. Their intentions may be noble in their own minds, but their methods are rigid and uncompromising. The girls who attend St. Scholastica's, aged from 12 to 18, are the daughters of the Hea elite or the exceptionally ambitious. They are the great hope of their families. To have a daughter accepted into such a school is a mark of immense prestige. It is a lottery ticket to a different kind of life. These girls are expected to become the future of the new Tanganyika. Teachers, nurses, wives of important men. They are being groomed to be leaders. But this opportunity comes at a staggering personal cost. From the moment they arrive, they are stripped of their old identities. They are given Christian names. They are forbidden from speaking their native Hea language. Only English and Swahili are permitted. Their traditional clothing is replaced by a drab, modest uniform. Their days are ruled by the ringing of a bell. A relentless schedule that is utterly alien to the cyclical, seasonal rhythms of village life. A typical day at St. Scholastica's would begin before dawn, with prayers in the cold, cavernous church. Then, a simple breakfast of porridge, followed by hours of academic lessons from a British-style curriculum. English literature, European history, mathematics, Christian scripture. The afternoon would be filled with vocational training, sewing, cleaning, cooking designed to make them good Christian housewives, followed by more prayers and chores. The evenings would be for supervised study, and then lights out. Discipline is absolute. The nuns demand piety, obedience, and academic excellence. Any infraction, a whispered word in Hea, a poorly recited Bible verse, a moment of levity during study halls met with swift punishment, ranging from public shaming to corporal punishment. The girls are taught that their own culture, their own traditions, the beliefs of their parents and grandparents, are backward, sinful, and must be purged. These girls are living in a state of profound psychological dissonance. They are caught in a cultural no man's land. At school, they are taught to be modern, Christian, and English-speaking. When they return to their villages for holidays, they are plunged back into a world of tradition, spirits, and kinship obligations that the school has taught them to reject. They belong fully to neither world. And the pressure is constant. They carry the immense weight of their family's expectations. Their success is not just their own. It is the entire family's investment, their entire family's hope for a better future. Failure is unthinkable. But the path to success is narrow and fraught with peril. They must navigate the complex social hierarchies of the school, the ever-present threat of punishment from the nuns, and the intense academic competition from their peers. They have no healthy outlet for this stress. They cannot complain. They cannot show weakness. They cannot express the homesickness, the confusion, the fear, the anger that must be churning within them. They are expected to be silent, stoic, and grateful. The pressure inside this small enclosed community of 159 adolescent girls is building day by day, week by week, becoming a powerful invisible force, compressing their young psyches until something somewhere has to give. St. Scholastica's mission school in Kashasha in January of 1962 is a psychological pressure cooker, with the heat turned all the way up. The lid is rattling, and it is about to blow. Part 2: The Epidemic. Chapter 4. The Joke That Broke the World. January 30th, 1962. It is an ordinary Tuesday. The mid-morning sun is already beating down on the iron roofs of St. Scholastica's, the heat radiating into the classrooms. Inside one of those rooms, a lesson is droning on. Perhaps it is a dry recitation of British monarchs, or the parsing of a complex English sentence. The air is thick with the smell of chalk dust, old wood, and the faint sweet scent of tropical flowers drifting in through the open windows. The only sounds are the teacher's monotonous voice, the scratching of pencils on paper, and the constant hypnotic hum of insects. 3 girls are sitting together. We will call them, for the sake of our story, Edina, Kessie, and Teresa. Edina is bright and ambitious, keenly aware of the hopes her family has placed on her. Kessie is quieter, more prone to homesickness, her thoughts often drifting back to her village. Teresa is the mischievous one, with a quick wit and a rebellious spark that the nuns are constantly trying to extinguish. The joke itself is the ghost. No one recorded it. It has vanished into the mists of time, and its insignificance is precisely what makes it so important. It was likely something utterly banal, a silly observation, a whispered commentary on the teacher's peculiar habit. Perhaps Teresa leaned over and told Edina a story about her younger brother's antics during the holiday. It doesn't matter. What matters is that in that moment, a tiny crack appeared in the monolithic boredom and tension of the day. Edina and Kessie reacted as any schoolgirls would. A hand flies to the mouth to conceal a smile. A snort is quickly suppressed. Shoulders begin to shake. They tried to swallow the laughter, pushing it down, knowing the sharp glare of the nun at the front of the room will soon be upon them. They exchange a wide-eyed look, a fleeting, exhilarating moment of shared conspiracy. This is a small, normal human moment. But then the normality shatters. The laughter doesn't stop. The pressure they are trying to push down is too great. The small release becomes a massive rupture. What began as a giggle escalates uncontrollably into a full-throated peal of laughter. It is no longer a response to the joke. The joke has been forgotten. The laughter has become a purely physical event, a chain reaction that they cannot stop. The other girls in the class turn to stare. Their initial amusement evaporates, replaced by a deep unease. This sounds wrong. It's too loud. It's too long. There's a frantic, desperate quality to it. The nun, her face a mask of stern disapproval, marches towards them. Edina! Teresa! Silence at once. This is a classroom, not a marketplace. Her words have no effect. The girls are now gasping for breath between shrieks of laughter. Tears are not trickling but streaming down their faces. Edina is clutching her stomach, doubled over in her seat, making horrible gulping sounds. Kessie has slumped forward, her head on her desk, her whole body convulsing with the rhythmic, painful mirth. They are no longer laughing. They are being laughed. Their bodies have been commandeered by a force they do not understand. And then the phantom leaps. A girl in the row behind them, let's call her Priska, has been watching this scene with a mixture of fear and fascination. She feels a knot of anxiety tighten in her own stomach. A nervous chuckle escapes her lips. She tries to stifle it, but it's too late. The invisible contagion has found a new host. Her chuckle becomes a cackle, and she too is swept away by the same hysterical, uncontrollable fit. Then another girl. And another. It spreads through the classroom with the terrifying speed of a rumor. Within 10 minutes, the room is no longer a place of education. It is bedlam. It is a chorus of shrieking, sobbing laughter. The nun stands frozen, her authority utterly dissolved, staring at the scene of mass hysteria unfolding before her. The chaos spills out of the classroom and into the schoolyard. The sound of its strange, high-pitched, painful symphony carries across the mission compound. Girls in other classes hear it and come to their windows. The sight of their peers in the grip of this bizarre affliction is a potent trigger. The illness leaps from building to building, transmitted by sight and sound. By the end of that first day, St. Scholastica's is a school in name only. It has become an open-air asylum. 95 of the 159 students are now afflicted. The small infirmary is overwhelmed. The nuns run frantically from one girl to another, trying to offer comfort, a slap on the back, a cup of water, but they are powerless. The symptoms are terrifyingly consistent. The central feature is the recurring exhausting fits of laughter, often mixed with intense crying. These fits can last for a few minutes or, in some cases, for hours on end. The girls are left weak, breathless, and in genuine physical pain. They complain of aching chests, sore abdominal muscles, and headaches. Many experience dizziness and disorientation. Some faint, collapsing in heaps on the ground, their bodies still twitching with the echoes of the laughter even as they lose consciousness. A few develop angry red rashes on their skin. All of them are terrified. In their lucid moments between fits, they weep with fear, begging the nuns to make it stop, asking what devil has possessed them. The cycle is vicious and self-perpetuating. A girl might finally cry herself into an exhausted sleep, only to be jolted awake by the sound of another girl's fit starting up, which in turn triggers her own, beginning the agonizing process all over again. The school is trapped in an endless looping soundtrack of psychological horror. For weeks, this nightmare continues. From the end of January through February and into March, the school is paralyzed. All lessons cease. The nuns, at the end of their wits, do the only thing they can think of. They pray. They hold vigils. They perform exorcisms. They suspect a demonic influence, a punishment from God for some hidden sin. But the prayers go unanswered. The laughter continues. Finally, on March 18, 1962, after nearly 2 months of ceaseless chaos, the administration makes a fateful decision. They admit defeat. They declare the school ungovernable. They will close St. Scholastica's indefinitely and send every single girl home. The logic is simple. Remove the girls from this cursed place, this epicenter of the contagion, and surely the affliction will wither and die. It was a perfectly rational decision, and it was the single greatest mistake they could have possibly made. They were not extinguishing the fire. They were flinging its burning embers to the four winds. Chapter 5: The Fire in the Villages. The closing of St. Scholastica's was not an end. It was an escalation. Each of the 159 girls who traveled home from Kashasha that week became an unwilling vector, a psychological typhoid Mary. They carried the epidemic in their minds, ready to seed it in the fertile soil of their home communities. Let's follow Teresa, the mischievous one, on her journey home to her village of Nshamba, a bustling community several hours away. Her parents are shocked to see her. They greet her with a mixture of joy and apprehension. The school is closed? Why? Teresa, ashamed and traumatized, struggles to explain. There was a sickness, she mutters. A laughing sickness. Her parents are baffled. It makes no sense. They check her for fever, for any sign of a known disease. They find nothing. For a few days, an uneasy quiet settles over the household. Teresa is withdrawn and sullen. She helps with chores, but her eyes are haunted. She is a stranger in her own home. Then one evening, as the family sits together, it happens. Perhaps a younger sibling says something funny, or a memory of the school surfaces. A single giggle escapes Teresa's lips. Her parents smile, relieved to see a flicker of her old self. But the giggle doesn't stop. It grows, quickly morphing into the familiar, horrible, convulsive fit. She collapses to the dirt floor of their home, her body racked with the same painful, joyless laughter she endured at school. Her family's confusion turns to sheer terror. They rush to her, trying to hold her, to comfort her, but it's like trying to calm a lightning strike. Her younger sister, no more than 10 years old, watches with wide, terrified eyes. She sees her hero, her sophisticated older sister who went away to the mission school, reduced to this thrashing, screaming creature. The fear is too much. The sister begins to cry, and then a nervous, high-pitched giggle bursts out of her. The phantom has leaped. Within minutes, the younger sister is also in the grip of the hysteria. The scene that played out at St. Scholastica's is now reenacted in miniature, in a small family home in Nshamba. And from this home it begins to spread. The next day, a neighbor comes to see what the commotion is about. She finds the mother weeping and the 2 daughters in the throes of the bizarre fits. The sight is so shocking, so profoundly disturbing, that the neighbor herself feels a wave of panic and nausea, and soon she too is afflicted. The epidemic spreads through Nshamba not like a germ, but like a gossip. It follows the pathways of social interaction. It is carried from house to house by visiting friends and relatives. It primarily strikes down young women and girls, those who can most easily identify with the initial victims, but it is not exclusively limited to them. School-age boys begin to show symptoms. A few adult men, particularly those already anxious or suggestible, also succumb. By April and May of 1962, Nshamba is a village under siege from within. Official reports from the period, compiled by perplexed local administrators, state that 217 residents of the village were incapacitated by the laughing fits. Daily life disintegrates. The fields lie untended. The marketplace is half empty. Children are kept indoors. The very fabric of the community, woven from daily interaction and mutual support, begins to unravel. The village is filled with an atmosphere of dread, punctuated by the chilling sound of hysterical laughter echoing from the huts. Fear, as it always does, seeks an explanation. And in the world of the Haya, the most readily available explanation was witchcraft. Whispers begin. Who has a grudge against Teresa's family? Who is jealous of their daughter's education? Suspicion falls on old women, on rival families, on anyone who seems odd or resentful. The social cohesion of the village is poisoned by paranoia. The local waganga, the traditional healers, are overwhelmed with pleas for help. They perform divination rituals to identify the source of the curse. They prescribe protective charms and herbal remedies. They lead community purification ceremonies. But the laughter mocks their efforts. It is a malady that lies outside their traditional understanding. It is a modern curse. The nascent Tanganyikan government is equally powerless. District officials arrive in Nshamba and file bewildered reports back to the capital. What are they supposed to do? You can quarantine a leper. You can distribute food in a famine. How do you fight an epidemic of laughter? Their bureaucratic tools are useless against this intangible foe. And the fire continues to spread. A girl from Nshamba visits her aunt in the nearby Kanyenjurika region, and a new outbreak begins there. The epidemic finds its way back into the school system. The Ramashini Girls' Middle School in the main town of Bukoba reports an outbreak, and it too is forced to close its doors. The original school in Kashasha attempts to reopen in May, but the laughter erupts again almost immediately among the remaining students, and it is shuttered for good, its name now synonymous with the strange plague. For an astonishing 18 months, from January 1962 to the middle of 1963, this psychological contagion ripples across the entire Bukoba district and beyond. It comes in waves. It will seem to die down in one area, only to flare up unexpectedly in another. In total, official records document the closure of 14 different schools. The estimated number of victims is over 1,000, but the true toll, including unreported cases in remote homesteads and the immense secondary impact of social and economic disruption, is impossible to calculate. The story is simply too bizarre to remain a local curiosity. It is picked up by the Tanganyika Standard newspaper, and from there, the international wire services Reuters, the Associated Press broadcast it to a fascinated and bewildered world. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic. The name is catchy, memorable, and deeply misleading. It trivializes the suffering of the victims, turning their traumatic ordeal into a piece of exotic, comical folklore. But for the people of Bukoba, it is no laughing matter. It is a waking nightmare. Faced with a crisis that defies traditional beliefs and modern governance, the authorities turn to their last resort. They make an appeal to the world of Western medicine and science. They need anyone to come and explain the madness. They need to know what kind of enemy they are fighting. Part 3, The Investigation. Chapter 6. The Hunt for a Physical Culprit. When the call for help was answered, it was by doctors and researchers trained in the rigorous logical discipline of Western epidemiology. Their worldview was one of pathogens, toxins, and measurable physical phenomena. They arrived in the Bukoba district armed with the scientific method, determined to hunt down the physical culprit behind the laughing plague. Their investigation was a masterclass in methodical elimination, a systematic process of closing every possible physical door to see what, if anything, was left. One of the key figures to study the event was a Professor A.M. Rankin, whose paper on the epidemic, co-authored with P.J. Phillip, remains one of our primary sources. Their first and most pressing task was to rule out an infectious agent. Could it be a virus? They considered novel strains of influenza or polio, or perhaps a previously unknown neurotropic virus that specifically targeted the parts of the brain controlling emotion and motor function. They examined the afflicted individuals. They took blood samples, a challenging task in the remote, poorly equipped villages. These samples were carefully transported to better-equipped labs for analysis. The results were unanimous and confounding. Nothing. No unusual antibodies. No elevated white blood cell counts. No signs of systemic infection. Crucially, none of the victims had a fever. A fever is the body's cardinal sign of a battle against an invading pathogen. Its complete absence was a massive red flag. The laughing plague was a cold sickness. What about a bacterium? Perhaps a strange form of tetanus, which causes muscle spasms known as rhesus sardonicus or the sardonic smile. But again, the symptoms didn't quite fit, and there was no evidence of bacterial infection. With infectious agents proving to be a dead end, the investigation turned to toxicology. Could the victims have been poisoned? This theory seemed promising as it could explain a localized outbreak. The focus immediately fell on the food and water supply at the St. Scholastica's school, the epicenter. The prime suspect was ergotism. The researchers were well aware of its history. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other grains. When milled into flour and eaten, its psychoactive alkaloids can cause two terrifying syndromes: gangrenous ergotism, which causes burning sensations and loss of limbs, and convulsive ergotism. The convulsive form was a near-perfect match for some of the historical demonic possession and dancing plague outbreaks in Europe. It causes violent muscle spasms, agonizing pain, hallucinations, mania, and psychosis. Could a similar fungus have contaminated the maize or millet used to make the girls' daily porridge? Samples of the school's food stores were meticulously collected. Bags of maize, beans, and other grains were sent for analysis. The results came back, and with them another dead end. There was no trace of ergot. They tested for other mycotoxins, like aflatoxins from moldy peanuts, which can cause liver damage and other illnesses. Nothing. They tested the local water sources. Nothing. The theory of a shared, ingested poison collapsed under the weight of negative evidence. The investigators then had to consider more exotic environmental possibilities. Could it be a form of viral encephalitis and inflammation of the brain? Certain types are transmitted by insect bites, most notably mosquitoes. This could explain the neurological symptoms. But this theory, too, quickly ran into insurmountable problems. Firstly, encephalitis almost always presents with high fever, severe headaches, and often profound confusion or coma, clinical picture very different from the lucid, terrified, but afebrile laughing girls. Secondly, and more importantly, the pattern of the epidemic spread made no sense for an insect-borne disease. An illness carried by mosquitoes would be geographical. It would affect people in a certain area regardless of their social connections. You would expect to see multiple members of a single household fall ill: parents, children, boys, girls. But the Tanganyika laughter epidemic was exquisitely, bizarrely selective. It was a socialite. It cherry-picked its victims. It would infect a teenage daughter but completely spare her parents and brothers living under the same roof, breathing the same air, and being bitten by the same mosquitoes. It would leapfrog over miles of countryside to infect another girl's school, while leaving the villages in between untouched. This was not the signature of a biological vector. It was the signature of something else. Every single path of physical investigation led to a brick wall. No virus, no bacterium, no fungus, no poison, no environmental toxin. The researchers were left with a collection of dramatic, undeniable symptoms and a complete absence of any physical cause. They had meticulously peeled away every layer of biological and environmental possibility, and when they were done, they were left with a terrifying intangible core. The problem, they were forced to conclude, was not in the body. It was in the mind. The ghost was not in the machine. The ghost was the machine. They were face to face with one of the most dramatic, widespread, and clear-cut examples of a phenomenon they had only read about in textbooks: mass psychogenic illness. Chapter 7. Naming the Nameless Ghost. To diagnose an illness of the mind on such a massive scale is a profound and difficult step. It requires a fundamental shift in perspective, away from the familiar world of germs and toxins, and into the strange, murky territory of the human psyche. The term the investigators settled on was epidemic hysteria, a diagnosis that has since evolved into the more precise and less pejorative term, mass psychogenic illness, or MPI. Let us dissect this diagnosis, for it is the key that unlocks the entire mystery. MPI is not about people faking it. This is the most crucial and often misunderstood point. The suffering of the 1,000+ victims in Tanganyika was absolutely real. The pain in their chests was real. The dizziness was real. The fainting was real. The uncontrollable spasms of their diaphragms were real. MPI is a condition where the mind, specifically the subconscious mind, under extreme duress generates authentic, measurable physical symptoms. It is a conversion disorder on a collective scale. The concept of conversion disorder was first truly articulated by Sigmund Freud and his contemporaries in the late 19th century. They observed patients, mostly women, who presented with baffling neurological symptoms: paralysis of a limb, blindness, the inability to speak, for which there was no discernible neurological damage. Freud theorized that these patients were suffering from repressed psychological trauma. The unbearable emotional pain, unable to be processed or expressed consciously, was being converted into a symbolic physical symptom. A patient who had witnessed a horrific event might become blind because she subconsciously could not bear to see the memory anymore. The physical symptom, while debilitating, was less painful to the psyche than confronting the original trauma. MPI is this same mechanism, but supercharged with the power of social contagion. It requires two key ingredients: a pre-existing condition of shared stress and a trigger. Let's re-examine the Tanganyika case through this lens. Ingredient 1: the shared stress. As we explored in Part 1, the girls at St. Scholastica's were living in a perfect storm of psychological stress. They were adolescents, a time of natural emotional turmoil. They were caught in a cultural vice, torn between the traditional world of their families and the rigid, alien world of the mission. They were under immense pressure to succeed academically, carrying the hopes of their entire kin group. They were in a closed, authoritarian environment where the normal outlets for stress, talking back, crying, expressing frustration, were forbidden and punishable. Their minds were collectively primed for a breakdown. They were a psychological powder keg. Ingredient 2: the trigger. The joke and the initial burst of laughter from Edina, Kessie, and Teresa was the spark. That first laugh was likely a genuine momentary release. But in this hyper-pressurized environment, the release valve blew out. The laughter continued, fueled not by humor, but by the massive reserve of pent-up psychic energy. It became a hysterical reaction, a physical manifestation of the mental pressure that had become too great to contain. The symptom itself was a grimly perfect metaphor for their condition, a desperate, convulsive attempt at joy that was immediately and overwhelmingly painful. The contagion mechanism. Now consider the spread. Priska, the fourth girl, sees her friends in this state of bizarre distress. Her own mind, already marinating in the same stew of anxieties, recognizes this behavior not as a joke, but as a symptom of the very distress she herself is feeling. It provides a sudden, shocking, and crucially socially acceptable script for a breakdown. Her subconscious mind thinks, I cannot scream, I cannot rebel, I cannot fail my exams. But this laughing sickness is something I cannot control. It is not my fault. It is an illness that has befallen me. And so, through the power of suggestion and unconscious mimicry, her brain adopts the same symptom. This is the power of the nocebo effect, the evil twin of the placebo. A nocebo is an inert substance that causes harm because a person believes it will. In MPI, the dramatic symptom witnessed in another person acts as a powerful nocebo. It convinces the observer's brain that it too is under attack, and the brain dutifully generates the expected symptoms. This model explains every baffling aspect of the Tanganyika laughter epidemic. Why it started in the school, it was the point of highest concentrated stress. Why it affected primarily adolescent girls. They were the demographic under the most specific and intense cultural and academic pressure. Why it spread along social lines. MPI is transmitted not by germs, but by empathy, suggestion, and shared anxiety. It follows the lines of who you know, who you identify with, and who you see. Why no physical cause was ever found. The pathogen was psychological. The investigation was not a failure for finding nothing. It was a success because its findings proved a negative, forcing a conclusion that lay outside of conventional medicine. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic was a textbook case, perhaps the most dramatic and widespread ever documented, of a community's collective mind buckling under an invisible weight. It was a social fever, a psychic plague, a shared nightmare made terrifyingly real. Chapter 8. The Ghost in the Historical Mirror. To see the Tanganyika outbreak as a complete anomaly is to miss its deep connection to the history of the human psyche. While its specific symptom lauder was unique, the underlying phenomenon of mass psychogenic illness is a recurring character in the human story, appearing in different costumes depending on the beliefs and anxieties of the era. To understand 1962, we must look in the historical mirror. Let us travel back to the late Middle Ages in Europe. This was a world steeped in religious fervor, but also racked by plague, famine, war, and profound social upheaval. Life was precarious, and the dominant worldview held that the world was a battleground between God and the devil. It is no surprise that this era produced a rash of bizarre, collective psychogenic events, interpreted through a supernatural lens. Consider the dancing plagues. The most famous, but by no means the only case, erupted in the city of Strasbourg in July 1518. It began like our story with a single individual, a woman named Frau Trophia. She stepped out of her house and began to dance silently, fervently, in the street. There was no music. Her expression was one of anguish. She danced for nearly a week. Within that week, 33 others had joined her, their bodies flailing in the same trance-like state. The Panic City authorities, applying their own flawed medical logic, concluded the dancers were suffering from hot blood, and that the cure was to let them dance the fever out. They cleared guild halls, erected a wooden stage in the marketplace, and even hired musicians to accompany the afflicted. This, of course, was like pouring gasoline on a fire. The official sanction and public spectacle only amplified the contagion. Within a month, over 400 citizens of Strasbourg were dancing uncontrollably. They danced until their feet were bloody stumps, until they collapsed from dehydration, stroke, and sheer exhaustion. Dozens died. This was not a festival. It was a mass, convulsive expression of a community's unbearable stress. Now let's visit the convents of medieval Europe. These were the female equivalents of the mission school, closed institutions populated by young women, many of whom had not chosen their vocation, living under a rigid regime of prayer, silence, and absolute obedience. They were breeding grounds for psychogenic outbreaks. In the 15th century, a nun in a German convent began to bite her companions. The behavior spread like a virus until the entire convent was engaged in a frenzy of biting. In a French convent, a nun, for reasons lost to time, began to meow like a cat. Soon, other nuns joined her, until the entire community would gather at a set time each day and meow in unison for hours, to the utter horror of the surrounding village, who were convinced the convent was possessed by demons. In Italy, nuns at another convent believed they were bewitched and began running wild, uttering blasphemies and exhibiting superhuman strength. In each case, the pattern is the same: a high-stress, closed community, and a bizarre, contagious behavior that provides a subconscious, blameless outlet for intolerable psychological pressure. The symptoms are shaped by the cultural beliefs of the time. In a world that believed in demonic possession, the symptoms looked like possession. As the world moved into the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, the supernatural explanations faded, replaced by scientific-sounding ones, but the phenomenon persisted. In factories in England during the 18th and 19th centuries, there were numerous outbreaks of what was called factory hysteria, where young female workers would suddenly be seized by fainting spells, convulsions, or choking fits that would spread rapidly through the assembly line. The cause was not a toxin in the air. It was the brutal, dehumanizing conditions of early industrial labor. And the ghost continues to walk in our own time. In 2011, in the small post-industrial town of Leroy, New York, a cheerleader named Thera Sanchez woke up with uncontrollable stuttering and body tics. Within weeks, nearly 20 other students at her high school, almost all of them girls, had developed similar, debilitating Tourette's-like symptoms. The case exploded in the national media. A panicked community searched for answers. Was it a toxin from a nearby chemical spill? Was it a side effect of a new vaccine? Was it a new, terrifying neurological disease? The activist Aaron Brockovich visited the town. Top neurologists from around the country examined the girls. After months of exhaustive and expensive testing ruled out every conceivable environmental and biological cause, the consensus diagnosis was delivered: conversion disorder and mass psychogenic illness. The toxin was the ambient stress of modern adolescence, academic pressure, social anxiety, an uncertain future amplified and spread through the hyperconnected world of social media. From meowing nuns and dancing peasants to laughing schoolgirls and twitching teenagers, the story is the same. The costumes change, the language used to describe it changes, but the underlying human mechanism remains constant. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic was not a bizarre African anomaly. It was a classic, spectacular performance of a timeless human drama, a testament to the mind's terrifying power to make its nightmares real. Part 4. Aftermath and Echoes. Chapter 9. The Fever Breaks. All epidemics, whether of the body or the mind, eventually end. But the Tanganyika laughter epidemic did not end with a decisive breakthrough or a miracle cure. There was no vaccine, no antidote. It simply dissipated. Like a fog burning off in the morning sun, it gradually lost its power and coherence. Over the long course of 1963, the waves of laughter became less frequent. The duration of the fits grew shorter. The number of new cases dwindled to a trickle, and then to none. The last official reports of the phenomenon faded out around the middle of the year. A full 18 months after the first joke was told in that hot classroom in Kinshasa. Why did it stop? The reasons are likely as complex as the reasons it started. As the phenomenon became more widely known and medical authorities began to offer a somewhat rational, if psychological, explanation, the terrifying mystery at its core may have begun to lose some of its power. The initial shock and novelty wore off. As life slowly, tentatively returned to a semblance of normality, the social structures that had been disrupted began to reassert themselves. Perhaps most simply, the collective psychic fever just broke. The immense pressure that had built up had been released, albeit in a traumatic and destructive way, and the system could slowly begin to reset itself. The 14 schools that had been forced to close eventually reopened their doors. The students returned, forever marked by what they had experienced. The village of Nshamba and the other affected communities slowly picked up the pieces. The fields were tended again. The markets grew lively again. The sound of normal, joyful laughter gradually replaced the memory of its horrifying echo. But the legacy of those 18 months was profound. For the 1,000 or more individuals who were directly afflicted, it was not a quirky historical footnote. It was a period of their lives lost to a terrifying, painful, and deeply embarrassing ordeal. They had to live with the memory of their own bodies betraying them, and with the social stigma that inevitably follows such a strange event. They were the ones who had the laughing sickness. For the Haya community, the event would have been absorbed into their oral history. A cautionary tale, a mystery to be debated for generations. Was it truly a mind sickness, as the European doctors claimed? Or had the doctors, with their limited understanding, simply put a scientific label on what the elders knew all along to be a powerful curse, a spiritual imbalance? The event would have left a permanent scar on the region's collective psyche. Chapter 10: The Meaning of the Madness. Decades later, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, what does the Tanganyika laughter epidemic truly teach us? It is far more than just a bizarre medical mystery. It is a parable, a story with layers of meaning that speak to the very nature of our minds and our societies. On one level, it is a powerful and unsettling demonstration of the mind-body connection. It shatters the convenient illusion that our mental world and our physical world are separate. It proves that feelings, anxiety, stress, fear are not just abstract concepts. They are potent biochemical forces that can have devastating physical consequences. It shows us that health is not merely the absence of physical disease, but a delicate balance of physical, mental, and social well-being. On another level, the epidemic is a potent political and social metaphor. It can be read as the physical manifestation of a society's growing pains. The newly independent Tanganyika was a nation in a state of collective conversion disorder. The exhilarating joy of Uhuru freedom was converting into the painful, convulsive, and often chaotic reality of nation-building. The girls at the mission school, caught between a traditional past and a modern future, were a microcosm of the entire nation's dilemma. Their bodies were acting out the unspoken, society-wide conflict. The story is also a profound cautionary tale about the dangers of unacknowledged stress and the importance of having healthy outlets for emotional expression. The girls at St. Scholastica's were not allowed to be sad, angry, or afraid. They were expected to be pious and obedient. Because those normal emotional channels were blocked, the pressure built up until it erupted through a bizarre and pathological pathway. It reminds us that repression is not a solution. It is merely a deferment, often with explosive consequences. Finally, the Tanganyika laughter epidemic forces us to confront the fragility of our own consensus reality. We operate on the assumption that we are rational individuals, in control of our own bodies and minds. This event shows us how easily that control can be relinquished, how susceptible we are to social contagion, and how our collective beliefs and fears can shape our physical experience of the world in the most profound ways. It reveals that beneath the thin veneer of civilization, our brains are still wired with ancient, primal mechanisms of mimicry and group panic that can be triggered under the right or wrong conditions. The story began with a whisper in a classroom. It became a national crisis that consumed a region for a year and a half. It was an illness woven from nothing more than thought, feeling, and fear, yet its impact was as real as any virus. It serves as a permanent, chilling reminder that the most fertile ground for strange phenomena is not some distant, haunted landscape, but the vast, uncharted territory of the human mind itself. And that sometimes the most terrifying sound in the world is the sound of a laugh with no joy behind it. A laugh that is not an expression of happiness, but the echo of a spirit breaking. Epilogue. The Unquiet Ghost. The ghost of the Tanganyika laughter epidemic has never been fully laid to rest. It lingers in the footnotes of medical journals and psychology textbooks. It surfaces periodically in articles and documentaries about the world's most bizarre events. It remains one of the clearest and most dramatic signposts we have, pointing to the mysterious intersection of the mind, the body, and society. It challenges us to be better listeners. When a community reports a strange cluster of illnesses, it challenges us to look beyond the immediate search for a physical cause and to ask deeper questions. What are the underlying stresses in this community? Who is under the most pressure? Who is voiceless? What anxieties are not being spoken aloud? Sometimes an outbreak of mysterious headaches in an office is not about the air quality. It's about a toxic boss. Sometimes a wave of fainting spells in a school is not about a gas leak. It's about unbearable academic pressure. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic teaches us to look for the illness within the illness. Thank you for taking this long and complex journey with me tonight. Thank you for sitting in this quiet space and wrestling with a story that offers no easy answers, only profound and unsettling questions. We have traveled from the mechanics of a single laugh to the birth of a nation, from the beliefs of the Haya people to the cutting edge of neuropsychology. We have seen how a simple joke can, in the right environment, shatter a community. If this deep exploration of the Tanganyika laughter epidemic, of mass psychogenic illness, and of this truly strange phenomenon has resonated with you, I invite you to become part of this ongoing conversation. Please consider leaving a like, which helps others find these stories. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you can join us for our next excavation of a forgotten corner of history. Most importantly, I want to hear your voice. What part of this sprawling story will stay with you? Was it the plight of the schoolgirls, the clash of cultures, the history of mass hysteria, or the simple terrifying idea that our minds can so powerfully betray our bodies? Please, share your thoughts in the comments section below. These stories are not monologues. They are dialogues, and your perspective enriches them immeasurably. There are so many more stories to tell, so many more mysteries to investigate. Until we meet again, I wish you well. Be kind to your mind. Listen to its whispers before they become screams. And stay curious. Always stay curious. Part 2. The Place of the Spirit. Chapter 4. The World of the Haya People. Now our lens must zoom in again, from the grand stage of the nation to a very specific and ancient corner of it. We travel to the northwest, to the lush, rolling hills that border the vast inland sea of Lake Victoria. The lake itself is a character in this story, a source of life, of food, of transport, and of myth. This region, known as Bukoba, is the homeland of the Haya people, the community that would find itself at the epicenter of our strange phenomenon. To understand what happened to the Haya in 1962, we cannot view them through a purely Western scientific lens. We must try as best we can to step inside their world, to understand the cosmology, the belief system that had shaped their perception of reality for centuries. The Haya are a Bantu-speaking people, with a long and proud history. For centuries before the arrival of Europeans, their society was organized into a series of small, but highly sophisticated kingdoms, or omukama. Each kingdom was ruled by a hereditary king, the omukama, who was not just a political leader, but also a semi-divine figure, a crucial link between the living and the spirit world. The land itself was intricately tied to this social structure, with clans holding specific rights and obligations, all flowing from the authority of the king. Their lives were, and still are, intimately woven with the banana plant. The banana grove, or kibanja, is the heart of every Haya homestead. It is a multi-generational inheritance, passed down through the male line. Bananas are not just a food source. They are the very fabric of the culture. They provide the staple food, a steamed mash called matoke. They provide fiber for weaving. Their leaves are used for thatching and wrapping, and they are fermented to make a potent banana beer, rubisai, which is central to all social and ritual occasions. To be a Heya is to be a person of the banana grove. Later in the colonial era, another plant came to dominate their lives: coffee. The Germans, and later the British, encouraged its cultivation as a cash crop. This introduced the Heya to the global capitalist economy, tying the fortunes of a small farmer in Bukoba to the commodity markets of distant, unknown cities. Coffee brought money and a degree of modernity, but it also brought new anxieties, new inequalities, and a new dependence on forces far beyond their control. But the most important landscape we must explore is the invisible one: the Heya spiritual world. For the Heya, the world is not simply inert matter. It is alive, suffused with spiritual forces that directly and constantly interact with the world of the living. This spiritual ecosystem has several key inhabitants. First and most important are the Mizumu, the spirits of the ancestors. The Heya believe that death is not an end, but a transition. The spirits of the dead, particularly one's direct lineage, remain active members of the family. They watch over their living descendants, offering protection and blessings if they are honored and remembered. But if they are forgotten, neglected, or if the living break important taboos, the ancestors can become angry, withdrawing their protection or causing misfortune, illness, infertility, or financial ruin. Maintaining a good relationship with the Mizumu through rituals, offerings, and remembrance is therefore a fundamental duty of every Heya family. Beyond the ancestors are a whole host of other spirits. There are nature spirits that inhabit specific rocks, trees, or parts of the lake. There are also powerful, named spirits or deities, the Mbandwa, who were once the center of a complex cult, with their own priests and mediums. While the rise of Christianity diminished the formal worship of the Mbandwa, belief in their power and influence did not simply vanish. It went underground, coexisting with the new faith in a complex syncretic dance. A person might go to church on Sunday morning to pray to the Christian God, and in the afternoon visit a traditional diviner to appease an angry ancestral spirit. The two were not seen as mutually exclusive. They were simply different tools for navigating a complex and spiritually charged world. Chapter 5: The Logic of Witchcraft. Within this animated cosmos, there is one force that is a source of constant, pervasive fear. It is the force the Heya call Abulogo. The word is often translated as witchcraft, but this English word, with its baggage of fairy tales and Halloween costumes, fails to capture the terrifying reality of the concept. For the Heya, Abulogo is a logical and coherent explanation for the problem of evil and undeserved suffering. In a world where everything has a cause, misfortune is not random. A sudden, inexplicable illness, a child that dies in infancy, a healthy cow that suddenly stops giving milk, a business that fails, these things don't just happen. They are caused. And while the cause might sometimes be an angry spirit, it is very often attributed to the malevolent, antisocial actions of a human being. A witch or Amulogo. An Amulogo is not a fantastical creature. They are a neighbor, a relative, a coworker. They are ordinary people consumed by the most corrosive of human emotions: jealousy, envy, spite, or greed. An Amulogo is someone who cannot stand to see another person succeed. Your promotion at work, your beautiful child, your successful harvest, these things can incite a terrible envy in the heart of an Amulogo, who will then use supernatural means to tear you down. The methods of the Amulogo are varied and sinister. They might use bad medicine, burying a cursed object on your property. They might send a spirit to attack you in your sleep. They might even possess the power to harm from a distance, through the power of their malevolent will alone. The fear of Abulogo is therefore a powerful force for social control. It encourages people to be modest, to not flaunt their wealth, and to maintain good relationships with their neighbors, lest they incite the deadly envy that could lead to a bewitchment. When a person believes they have been bewitched, they do not go to a doctor. They go to a specialist in the spiritual world, a diviner or traditional healer, known as an omufimu. The Omufumu is the witch's opposite. They are a respected member of the community who possesses the knowledge to diagnose the source of a supernatural problem and to prescribe a cure. Through divination rituals, perhaps by casting shells, interpreting dreams, or entering a trance-like state, the Omufumu can identify whether the problem is caused by an angry ancestor or by an act of witchcraft. If it is witchcraft, they can perform counterspells, create protective amulets, and lead cleansing rituals to break the curse. The Omufumu is the spiritual detective and doctor of the Heya world. This belief system is of paramount importance to our story, because when a strange, inexplicable, and terrifying illness descended upon their daughters in 1962, the Heya people did not immediately think of viruses or toxins or mass psychogenic illness. They thought of Obulogo. Their cultural framework provided a ready-made, logical, and terrifying explanation for the madness. Someone somewhere was using witchcraft of a terrible and powerful kind. And this belief would shape their response, their fear, and their interpretation of the entire event. Chapter 6. The Island of Saint Scholastica's. Now into this ancient, intricate world of banana groves, ancestral spirits, and the ever-present fear of witchcraft, we must place a profoundly alien institution. It is the very heart of our story, the point of ignition. Let us call it, as a composite of the real schools of the era, St. Scholastica's Mission School for Girls, located in the village of Kashasha. Picture the physical place. A clearing in the lush green landscape. A cluster of stark functional buildings constructed from fired red brick with corrugated iron roofs. There is a simple but imposing church, its steeple reaching up as if to challenge the sky. There is a long Spartan dormitory block, a refectory, a few classrooms. The grounds are neatly kept, the paths swept clean, the grass cut short. The entire compound is likely surrounded by a hedge or a fence, marking a clear boundary between the world inside and the world outside. St. Scholastica's is an island of European order, of right angles and rigid schedules, set down in the middle of a flowing cyclical African landscape. The rulers of this island are the missionary nuns. Imagine them, women from Germany or Ireland or the Netherlands, who have left their own homes and families thousands of miles away to serve God in what they consider to be the darkness of Africa. Their faith is absolute, their convictions unshakable. In their own minds, their mission is one of pure love and salvation. They are here to save souls from eternal damnation, and to bring the light of Christian civilization to a primitive people. This worldview, however well-intentioned, is built on a foundation of profound cultural arrogance. They see Heya culture not as a rich and complex system of its own, but as a collection of pagan superstitions and sinful practices that must be stamped out. The students are the subjects of this civilizing project. The 159 girls at St. Scholastica's are the daughters of the local Heya elite chiefs, successful coffee farmers, local administrators, and those from more humble backgrounds whose sheer academic brilliance has earned them a coveted spot. To have a daughter at this school is a source of immense pride and a massive financial investment for any family. These girls are the embodiment of their family's aspirations for a modern future. They are expected to become the new African elite. But the price of this future is the systematic erasure of their past. From the day they arrive, they are remade in the mission's image. They may be given a new Christian name, Anastasia, Veronica, Clementina, supplanting the Heya name that connects them to their lineage. They are strictly forbidden from speaking their mother tongue. Anyone caught whispering in Heya is punished. They must speak only English, the language of the colonizer and of God's hymn book, or Swahili, the emerging national language. Their colorful traditional garments are replaced with a drab, modest, and ill-fitting uniform, designed to enforce conformity and suppress vanity. Their lives are governed by the tyrannical ringing of a bell. The bell signals when to wake, when to pray, when to eat, when to study, when to work, and when to sleep. This rigid, linear concept of time is utterly alien to the task-oriented, seasonal rhythms of village life. A typical day is a grueling marathon of discipline and instruction. It begins before dawn, with a call to prayer in the cold, stone-floored church. The girls recite prayers and sing hymns in a language they are still struggling to master. Breakfast is a simple, joyless affair. A bowl of thin porridge, eaten in supervised silence. Then, hours of academic lessons, based on a British curriculum that has little to no relevance to their own lives. They learn about the kings and queens of England, the geography of Europe, the intricacies of English grammar. They memorize Bible verses and the catechism. The afternoon is for practical work, which is essentially unpaid labor. They scrub floors, wash the nuns' habits, tend the mission's vegetable garden, and learn sewing not as a creative art, but as a practical skill for mending clothes and becoming a good, thrifty housewife. This is followed by more prayer, more study, a simple supper, and then to bed in a long, crowded dormitory, where even their dreams are not entirely their own. Discipline is constant and severe. The nuns patrol the school with a watchful, judgmental gaze, seeing sin and idleness everywhere. The girls live in a state of constant, low-grade fear. Fear of giving the wrong answer in class. Fear of breaking a rule. Fear of being publicly shamed for a moment of natural, girlish exuberance. They are taught that their bodies are vessels of sin, that their traditional dances are lewd, and that the beliefs of their parents are the work of the devil. This creates a state of profound and painful psychological dissonance, a condition that anthropologists call liminality. The girls are caught in between. They are no longer fully Hea, but they are not and can never be European. They are being trained for a future that has not yet arrived, in a country that is itself in a state of radical transformation. They carry the immense, unspoken weight of their family's dreams and sacrifices. They are under constant pressure to perform, to succeed, to be perfect. And they have no one to talk to. They cannot show weakness to the nuns. They are in competition with their fellow students. They cannot express the deep well of confusion, homesickness, anger, and anxiety that must be churning inside them. They are trapped. St. Scholastica's mission school in Kashasha, in January of 1962, is not just a school. It is a psychological pressure cooker. The heat is on, the steam is building, and the lid is rattling. Something somewhere is about to give way in the most spectacular and terrifying fashion imaginable.